Donald Trump wants a third term by LegalEagle. Now, I obviously try to, shy away from subjects like this because at the end of the day, I don't want to just be left alone, right? Kind of just want to do my own thing, have some fun, have some laughs. But unfortunately, when I have Idaho Representative Russ Fulcher deciding to email me, because I didn't sign up for his email list, somehow he got my email, asking for my support, and I could really use your support, and it's my job as a public servant to serve you. I'm sorry, I thought the rhetoric was we didn't give handouts, and that it was supposed to be merit and skill based. I was under the impression we didn't give handouts, or at least that's what I've been told. So now I'm a little upset. But I don't think for the reasons people might expect. Dive into this, shall we?
So we're doing third terms now. Yes, last week the media dropped a story that they considered an absolute bombshell. Donald Trump says he hasn't ruled out running for a third term. Now, it seems like we've been through this before on this channel, and I didn't expect to have to relitigate this question quite so soon. So everyone, listen up. The Constitution does not give President Trump the power to serve a third term. The 22nd Amendment says he cannot do it. And while I agree it's important to take most of Trump's threats seriously, America is in immediate and serious danger because of the challenge that Trump poses to the rule of law. So let's try and keep our eyes on the ball because he's threatening to burn America's justice system to the ground right now. But that being said,
so, I mean, realistically, we have discussed this, and it's one of those comments. This was actually on a habitual line crosser video we reacted to, where I posed the question, because this was obviously going around at the time. We were talking about, long live the king, quote unquote, to which my follow-up to that immediately was, so when does someone like, Idaho or Texas, when do they push forward the motion to just grant kingship? I thought was this not what people wanted, the long live the king rhetoric? Am I just dumb? I mean, I'm a dingus on the internet. I am also a certified window licker. So I look at this and I have to ask, why are we shying away from this? I was literally having a conversation this morning. Sig Sauer, right? Why has Sig Sauer not decided to be like, we would be honored to make sure that we would sell, firearms to our dear King Donald Trump, I feel like that could actually go over well for them PR-wise, right? Because clearly a massive influential figure that they're selling firearms to or attempting to sell firearms to, right? Why hasn't that happened? So I once again have to ask, was this not what people wanted? Was this not like, why is everyone so quiet about this, right? It's also, what is it? Something ICE able to go into people's houses now. Something ICE, allegedly not even an actual official federal organization or somewhat. A lot of 2A people being really quiet right about now. So when I said at the beginning, I'm frustrated for the reasons people might not expect. Once again, we come back to the dual talk. We come back to the hypocrisy, the rules for thee but not for me. And even trying to just sleaze systems. Oh, well, I didn't mean it. Okay, but I'm only for 2A, but in this specific situation. Why would you double talk then? I, as a dingus on the internet, own whatever. I don't care. Just don't be an idiot with it. If you're an idiot with it, guess what? You go to prison. You can't own again. Okay? Don't rob a store with a firearm, and we're all good. Pretty common sense, right? So it was one of those just glaring, nobody talked about it. And that's where I open up the door of, why are we not talking about this? No one? Anybody? A lot of people got really silent when I was asking that on a reaction.
Today, let's summarize the law and the 22nd Amendment, its history, and the reasons why we need to stop focusing on emergencies that are 4 years in the future, and then never talk about this ever again. Now, to understand why Trump can't run for a third term, we need to look at why presidents are term limited. When the framers debated the Constitution, Alexander Hamilton and James Madison had the truly terrible idea that the president should be nominated by Congress to serve for life. This was rejected for the obvious reason. The U.S. had declared independence from Great Britain because they did not want to be ruled by a monarch. Hamilton's proposal would have created an elective monarchy similar to the Vatican. One person becomes the head honcho until they die. But instead, the framers came up with a compromise, an electoral college system where the president would have no term limits. The original Constitution, ratified in 1789, made the office of president a 4-year position. It also created an office of vice president, who would be the president's successor in the event the president could no longer serve. Now, the framers are
which is actually very interesting, considering the number of conversations I've had with very intellectual individuals in regards to vice presidents, being kind of a bargaining chip, so to speak, where they are the more terrifying of the individuals. I don't know, something about JD Vance and the couch, though. I can't look at couches the same after that. I think we might need to make sure to cease and desist that man, because we can't have him do anything with them couches. Okay, you know those that queer word that people like to talk about, and wouldn't that classify as queer and strange to do something with couches? Once again, just the hypocrisy, it kind of confuses me. There's a lot of double talk happening, but then it changes. It's like how you ask somebody about DEI. Oh man, we're going buzzwords on this one, and then people will change their definition of it. I've watched it happen. Because I've talked about in a comment, right? I have legitimately talked about, go through my comment sections. Pretty sure there's some on Shoe and Head videos. Pretty sure there's some on Unsubscribed podcast reactions. When I've said I am a neurospicy individual, whether I am good at the job or not, and I've been competent and capable at a great many jobs. I was damn good in finance. As it turns out, employers do look at, well, you are a neurodivergent individual, and that will thus affect how they treat me. That is a factor that is realistically outside of my control, is it not? But that still technically makes me a DEI hire. Oh, but we don't mean that. Okay, oh, you're an exception because you can do the job. Okay, stop changing the goalposts, okay? This is why 99% of conversations, when the word or the phrase DEI comes up, I kind of eye roll. I roll my eyes, and I'm just like, this person just doesn't know what they're talking about. Additionally, I love the comments that it's like reading word soup. It's like reading like a bowl of alphabet soup, just mixing it up. And then it's a comment that calls you uneducated. And I'm just like, bro, I think we need to look a little bit in the mirror here. Now, this makes you upset. A lot of this should make you upset, which is why we should be handling this like adults. We should be going, hey, remember when everyone was like, nah, this Obama or this Bush guy or this insert whatever Nixon guy, right? Yeah, they can only have 2 terms, but now suddenly it's the exception. Stop with the double talk, okay? It makes me want to just NCIS gib smack a bunch of people. Not really legally, I cannot advocate for that. But if anything, I view this less as a political commentary and more of a social commentary with people's inability to string together coherent thoughts and actually say what they mean and stick to it. Stick to the principles, because why would they stick to it? That means consequences. Me putting out this video will have consequences. Consequences being good, positive, negative, neutral. There will be people who will say, I knew that Kip guy was a rotten egg all along. Okay, he's, he hates them guns. He is one of them transmissions, one of them Transformers supporters. I can't support this guy. And that's, okay, it's, have fun. Do whatever, right? There's going to be people who obviously will not watch the video. And honestly, that's completely fair to you. Watch what you want. I keep saying it. It's why I have 1,500 videos at this point. No, it will have consequences. Having an opinion inherently will just have consequences. It is, for all intents and purposes, an action, a move, if you will, right? Card games, chess, etc., moving a pawn, dropping counterspell, that is a move, that is a motion. You have changed the game state. Now, you can sit there and you can do that, obviously. And then, sure, what's the equal and opposite reaction? That ensues, right? Silence begets more silence. The moment you activate something, this is very prominent in the video game sphere, right? Well, video games, card games, etc. You've changed the game state. You, firing a 45 ACP out of your grandpa's 1911, have now changed the game state. There is now one less round in that magazine. It's about understanding the consequences of actions and understanding the why that goes into things. Don't like games like Resident Evil 5, like I've said before. Tell me why you don't like it. Be able to justify why, rather than something IGN game racist because South Africa. What have we added to this conversation? Explain to me why. It's rhetorical, obviously, right? But being able to explain why, asking the why questions. Have an opinion. Have an opinion about LegalEagle. Have an opinion about me. Have an opinion about any public figure we have talked about in this, right? Have an opinion. Be able to come to an educated and opinion about it. Be able to justify the why. Be able to justify your reasoning and defend it. That's literally how this works. That's how being an adult works.
Lauded as political geniuses, but they had some really, truly stupid ideas. And apart from maybe slavery and selective suffrage, Perhaps the dumbest idea that the framers had is that the person who finished second in the presidential election would win the vice presidency. But luckily, the Constitution was amended.
I saw Tim Waltz, and I just remembered his embarrassing. Was it his ad? The embarrassing. He was trying to handle a shotgun or something. No, that is one of those where even if someone's prior military, that was bad. Like that was embarrassing.
To fix that incredibly stupid oversight. More on that in a second. But in 1789, George Washington was unanimously elected president. He wound up serving 4 years and then winning a second term. He could have won again, but instead he decided to retire.
I'm stepping down, I'm not
Hamilton, yes!
And although Washington's retirement created a custom or a norm that presidents should retire after 2 terms, there was never a law stopping a president from serving a 3rd term. And a few of them tried it. Ulysses S. Grant ran for a 3rd term but lost the Republican primary to James Garfield. Grover Cleveland, the first president to win 2 non-consecutive terms, had a shot at a 3rd when the Democratic Party nominated him again, but he declined. So Washington's decision to serve only 2 terms established a tradition that all presidents followed until the 20th century. Then cracks appeared. When Teddy Roosevelt lost the Republican nomination to William Howard Taft, he ran for a 3rd term in 1912 under the Progressive Bull Moose Party. He split the...
Just saw the clip of Teddy Roosevelt, and I'm just like, that man's heart beat for democracy. He kept giving that speech.
Republican vote, and Woodrow Wilson won. Wilson eventually sought a 3rd term, but Democrats didn't nominate him. So you can see the pattern developing here. But in the 20th century, the norm of the 2-term president was not destined to hold. Then at the height of the Great Depression in 1933, with 24.9% of the nation's total workforce unemployed, along comes Franklin Delano Roosevelt. FDR's first 2 terms were focused on getting America through the Great Depression and rebuilding the country. Many of Roosevelt's reforms, like Social Security, were enormously popular. That's why voters easily gave Roosevelt a 3rd term. Then during World War II, Roosevelt ran for a 4th term and won again. The only thing that could stop Roosevelt was death, and he died 83 days into his final 4th term. But Congress did not approve of President Roosevelt serving more than 2 terms. And in 1947, Republican majorities in the House and Senate passed a constitutional amendment stipulating that, quote, no person shall be elected to the office of president more than twice.
I love how lightly people just throw around amendments, right? Like there's conventions that I was reading, I was talking about, someone asked my opinion on modern relationships unironically earlier in this chat. I was talking about just modern relationships as things that kind of disconcert me about them nowadays. And the subject of amendments came up because it literally a thing that the fat electrician had reacted to. It was a dumb post, and I'll probably do its own video on it. Very dumb post. And he was just like, no, that's dumb, to which we're in agreement on. Full disclosure, we're in agreement that it was a dumb post. It was about something potentially justifying cheating, right? Just no, we're in agreement that it was a dumb post. But comments under it was just like, well, this is why we need to get rid of that 19th Amendment, and something women can't think for themselves and women should be controlled. And I'm just like, wow, this is Twitter in a nutshell, and I kind of hate it. People playing fast and loose with the amendments. I also like how, because I've seen it happen. People will, something, right to free speech, 1A, something, they're a not C, as they call themselves. But suddenly they're not okay with the 1A. When you tell them things that have them thinking 30 years down the line in the therapist's office, and something wood chipper. Oh, but now there's a line. Once again, hypocrisy, consistency, double talk. Can we resolve this already? Because that's not how adults communicate, right? This is why the concept of a safe word is lost on so many people.
Passed, Harry Truman served 2 terms and he wanted a 3rd, but the Democratic Party nominated someone else. Finally, in 1951, the states ratified the 22nd Amendment, which states, quote, no person shall be elected to the office of president more than twice, and no person who has held the office of president or acted as president for more than 2 years of a term to which some other person was elected president shall be elected to the office of president more than once.
And that's how you can get a 10-year. If the vice president comes in on after year 2, so they serve 2 years, and then are elected 2 times as actual president, that's how you do get a 10-year term, 10-year tenure.
The 22nd Amendment says a person can only be elected to president 2 times for a total of 8 years. A person can serve for a maximum of 10 years in the case of a president who ascended to the position as vice president, assuming that they ascended to the office of president roughly halfway through their predecessor's term. So that means it is theoretically possible for a president to serve more than 8 years in office under some very narrow circumstances.
I mean, he said it a lot more intelligent than I did. It's almost like I did pay attention in high school. It's like I paid attention in was it U.S. history? I don't remember what the class was. I don't even know what the class was called. Clearly, I can pay attention. Clearly, I can. Oh yeah, this is the talking point. Rules is written, okay? Literally throwing the rule book at you. You're trying to learn like chess. You're trying to learn like, I don't know, Magic the Gathering. And literally just chuck a rule book at you. And I'm like, this is what a land does. This is what the pawn does. Oh, but I don't like it. Okay, play different game. or advocate to the whatever ruling board, whatever ruling body to change the damn rule. There's policy and procedure that go into that. That's how that works. Or maybe I just took all the stupid juice. That's entirely possible.
And the 22nd Amendment also addresses the scenario where a person serves less than 2 years of another president's term. This can happen if a president dies, resigns, or is impeached, and someone else steps in to fill their shoes.
Oh my God. I was not ready for the Richard Nixon jump scare. I made a post recently on my community tab about Donzo from Naruto being Naruto Richard Nixon. I talk about it a few times. Oh God, I can't not see him the same. Either of them. It's I'm not a crook. I did not steal those eyes. I did not steal those Sharingan. Oh my God, there's your humor for the day.
In this case, if the vice president serves more than 2 years of the term, they're officially only allowed to be elected once. And this was the situation for Vice President Gerald Ford, who became president after Richard Nixon resigned in 1973. Ford was only eligible to be elected once. So now let's address the core question: can Donald Trump run for a third term? Now, if you're going to violate the Constitution, you're going to want a good lawyer. But if you want a great lawyer, my law firm, the Eagle Team, can help.
10 out of 10 for that transition.
If you've gotten in a car crash, suffered a data breach, especially if you got one of those data breach letters saying that your information might have been leaked, or dealing with a workers' comp or social security issue, we can represent you or help find you the right attorney. By the way, we don't get paid unless you do, so there's nothing up front. So just click on the link in the description or call the phone number on screen for a free consultation with my team. Because you don't just need a legal team, you need the Eagle Team. President Trump.
10 out of 10. Transition was flawless. Ad was short and sweet. Audio was consistent. Visuals made sense. It was concise, right? Kind of like why I like the Fat Electrician reviews, right? It's no BS. What do I need to know? Thank you for telling me what I need to know. 10 out of 10. What more could you want from an ad?
Served one term from 2017 to 2021. He is now, at the time of this video, 1/12 of his way through his second term, which started in 2025 and will probably end in 2029. I say probably because, anything can happen. Just ask the French.
We have
I've consistently brought this point up. Everyone just absolutely dunks on the French, and then I'm like, but the French just every 100 years or so they just decide, nah, we're gonna break out the guillotines and just redo our entire structure. I don't know. I think the French are kind of based. Now, clearly, for obvious reasons, that is clearly not a call to action or any way, shape, or form an incitement to anything. That is clearly a joke about history, right? That is clearly a historically, this is just the precedent of the French, if it works.
almost 4 years to go, and that's a long time.
So, actually, I have a good point on this, because I was watching an interview the other day. I was watching an interview. It was actually a super good interview. It was Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher talking to somebody about a line George Lucas wanted Mark Hamill to read as Luke, but he's just like, George, I'm not going to say that. And he proceeded, the coherency, the ability to speak, right? Every time I hear him speak, I'm like, can somebody just Gibbs smack him so in the back of the head so he can stop pausing and speak fluently? I've seen it with just American news, and I see it all the time, whether it's public, whether it's whatever, right? No, I don't make a habit of watching news. It's just when I come down and somebody's watching it, right? But there's a lot more pausing. There's a lot more just disconnect, I guess. I don't know what that is. Now, I'm not a psychologist, a psychiatrist, or a sociologist by any means, so I think it would be disingenuous for me to put anything on that. My speech pattern is broken. I understand that. I pause a lot. I'm also neurospicy as hell, and I do my best. I don't understand what the excuse here is. I would assume for somebody to lead in any capacity, even if it's just a management position, the ability to speak well, fluently, and coherently would be paramount. It feels like communication's a big requirement for the job.
But despite that, so many people are saying, you've got to run again.
But Trump is right. 4 years is a long time. So why does he think he has a right to a third term? Well, because some lawyers took a look at the text of the 22nd Amendment and they decided that they found a loophole. The 22nd Amendment says, quote, no person shall be elected to the office of president more than twice.
Ah, yes, because I am not driving. I am merely traveling. I am merely porting across this country. Ah, okay. I see what's going on here.
These lawyers claim the word elected is ambiguous. And since the amendment doesn't say anything about serving a third term, then a person could serve more than 2 terms as long as they don't become the president through an election. Law professors Bruce Peabody and Grant Scott are the main proponents of this theory. They say, quote, notably, the text of the amendment restricts only re-election of an already twice elected president. The words themselves do not, 1, limit the amount of time, consecutively or cumulatively, a person may serve, or 2, prescribe such a person from reassuming the office of president by means other than election. But how would a person assume the presidency without being elected? Well, consider Gerald Ford. President Nixon appointed Ford as vice president after his original VP, Spiro Agnew, resigned. Then when Nixon resigned, Ford became the only person to serve as president without ever having been elected to the office of president or vice president.
The Constitution of the United States. So help me God. So help me God.
So think about how this could theoretically work in 2028. Let's say J.D. Vance runs as president and Kristi Noem is his
No, please, not the couches.
vice president. And if they win the election, Noem could step down, Vance could appoint Trump as vice president, Vance and Trump could make a deal where Vance would resign and Trump could serve another term despite not being elected. There are other possible routes for a person to become president without appearing on the ballot.
Sure.
For example, Trump could become Speaker of the House, either by getting elected to Congress or getting the Republicans to give him the job, and then through resignations, deaths, or impeachments, wind up becoming president for a third term. President Vance could also share power with Vice President Trump, which is a plan they have apparently actually floated. And professors Peabody and Grant say the Constitution permits these gambits. But
now, taking all the context out of it, these are the things that do fascinate me about legal. I'm not a lawyer, not substitute for any sort of legal advice, expert, etc. Obviously, if you have something that you have a legal query about, I would highly recommend speaking to a trained legal professional, right? This is why I look to legal things, because even taking the entirety of the context out of it, right? What is said? What is meant by elected, right? What is meant by this? Where does copyright law begin? Where does copyright law end? How does this, like in copyright, we've talked about Jif Lemon, right? Fair use, pillars of fair use, especially as well, and Imudahar, and I'm pretty sure LegalEagle has brought up in the past, right? Like, these are the things that my brain thinks about. It's no different than thinking about how does a movement from a White Scar unit in 40K, a White Scar plane, if the movement is interrupted to make a 6-inch movement, what happens? We've talked about the answers. Clearly, it actually goes back into the Deep Strike Reserve, right? Someone's going to know the actual terminology. Someone's going to know the ruling better than I can. In the comment section down below, feel free to leave that actual interaction there. But that's the thing, right? How does Mystical Space Typhoon work against something like Fire Formation 10 Key and Yu-Gi-Oh, right? Oh, MST technically negates because it's a continuous spell card, but it doesn't technically negate it. It's negated kind of by proxy, but not really. Point being, right, like the ruling interactions are what fascinate me. And I think that it should fascinate others. Obviously, in this case, you start getting into the quagmire that is politics, opinion pieces, rhetoric, etc., and thus making any attempt to actually like delve into the topic an inherently just awful effort, if I'm being completely honest. I go for the facts. I don't necessarily go for what someone's opinion is on this, right? That's kind of how that works. But yeah, this is actually why legal interests me. It's why we've gone over things like Rave Dactyl versus Air Neos, Konami, right, by TGS Anime, right? It's why we've covered Jif Lemon. It's why in what I do, right? Because realistically, as transformative as I could be, I'm sure LegalEagle could find that this isn't transformative enough and it does actually violate pillars of fair use and thus say, hey, Kip, I need to take this down. It's entirely possible. Will he? Debatable. I don't know. I think he's putting out some decent work. I think he's putting out some great work. But obviously, because I am making a derivative work, it's something I have to keep in the back of my mind. It is a derivative work. All art is derivative, sure. But like, these are things that we have to think about. Does everyone need to be an expert in it? That's why lawyers exist, is it not? But to have an understanding of, well, I can't just make a channel called Law Hawk and cover every single topic that he is. Maybe not. Maybe branding wise, maybe that could be in violation of Jif Lemon. Entirely possible. But like, I'm going to not gush on legal for a minute.
In order for a person to be eligible to hold the office of President of the United States, they must meet the following constitutional requirements. First, they must be a natural-born citizen of the United States, as outlined in Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5 of the U.S. Constitution. This means that they must have been born in the U.S. or be born abroad to a U.S. citizen parents under certain conditions. Second, they must be at least 35 years old at the time they assume office. And third, the person must have lived in the United States for at least 14 years.
Okay, but why do these people look like they're 70, though? Like, we talked about this in another video as well. What was it? It wasn't a fat electrician video. What was it? It was the shoe on a head video. The CIA dude accepting the hand grenade trophy. And I was just taken aback because I was just like, why is this dude a fossil? Why are so many of them so old?
But there are additional qualifications and limitations set forth in the amendments. For example, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment bans insurrectionists from being president. It says, quote, no person shall hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state who, having previously taken an oath to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof.
I was under the impression that armed insurrection was a firing squad. I was told that wasn't the case. I was under the impression 50 years ago that'd be firing squad. Nah, that's really all that topic goes to. The reason I actually bring it up is not the reason you might think. I'm on a huge horror binge, like a huge spooky binge, like, oh, true quote-unquote stories, right? Idaho came up a couple of times in some of these quote-unquote true stories, right? These Reddit posts. One of them was people that were going hiking along the Salmon River, allegedly, of course, because it's the internet, it's Reddit, take it with a grain of salt, right? And then just coming across an abandoned bunker in the middle of just this wilderness area. And, people with, AKs came out and tried to capture them. And I'm like, that is the most Idaho thing I've heard in a hot minute. To which people will say, excuse you? To which I respond, yes, that is the most Idaho thing that I have heard in a hot minute. The other one was, oh God, what was it? It was somewhere up near Montana. I'd have to find the actual video again, but it was something along the lines of something dude probably living out there in a cabin he constructed on parkland, and held someone at bolt action rifle, right? Like just held him at gunpoint. And it's like, no, that is in fact the second most Idaho thing I've heard recently. It's why I'm very cautious about this state. Now, is everybody this militia member? Is everybody this mountain man living off the... No, absolutely not. And I think making any sort of assumption can be disingenuous, and I think that could be incredibly harmful. Someone who's lived here for a hot minute, and especially from the dreaded C word, the Californians. Oh, I hate them Californians. Yes, I came up. I was in 4th grade. What do you want from me? Didn't have control over that. Thank you very much. Yeah, no, I've seen, this is a very Idaho thing. Let's put it that way. So that's why I specifically bring that up.
So that means a person who has engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the United States is barred from holding public office. Now, that's a whole can of worms that came up the summer before the election, and I'm not going to go back into it. But there is also the 12th Amendment ratified in 1803. It changed the process for selecting a vice president. Instead of the loser serving as the winner's VP, it allowed each party to nominate their team for president and vice president. The text says, no person constitutionally ineligible to the office of president shall be eligible to that of vice president of the United States. Now, almost everyone agrees that the text of the 12th Amendment means that no person who is constitutionally ineligible to be president could serve as vice president, meaning that under the plain text of the amendments, Trump could never become the vice president. Now, turning back to the 22nd Amendment, which says that no person can be elected president more than twice, Peabody and Scott argue that the 12th Amendment does not come into play when interpreting the 22nd because the amendment doesn't use the word eligible. That's present only in Article 2 and the 12th Amendment. And there's also an argument about the true meaning of the word eligible. But law professor Eugene Volokh scrutinized the historical record and concluded that eligible already carries another meaning, and that meaning is elected. He states, quote, I realize that this is far from perfect evidence. It's 40 years later than the usage, but the earliest law dictionary that I could find that contained the term, Bouvier's 1843, defines eligibility as capacity to be elected. I've seen no evidence that, contrary to Bouvier's definition, a person would have been seen in the early 1800s as being eligible to an office when he was legally barred from being elected or appointed to it. And the only question related to whether he could automatically assume it under some succession statute.
I love that my brain immediately took capacity to be elected. And my immediate follow-up was, oh, okay, so just not actually potato. Like, not actually IQ of potato. This is why there's legal professionals who handle things like this, right? That's why there's people with schooling who are far more educated than I am who handle things like this. Because the fact that my first default response Can they breathe? Do they have a pulse, or are they literally a potato?
Moreover, Yale professor Akhil Amar pointed out that Peabody's interpretation of the words ignores the fact that, quote, the words eligible and electable spring from the same Latin root, and that standard dictionaries have long included electable as one of the standard definitions of eligible. See, for example, OED entry on eligible. Given these facts, it would seem that a two-term incumbent is ineligible to the presidency within the meaning of the 12th Amendment, precisely because he is made unelectable to that office by the 22nd, and is thus barred by the 12th from being elected to the vice presidency in the first place. And I think Volokh and Amar are correct. If the word eligible also means electable, then the 22nd Amendment would read, no person shall be eligible to hold the office of president more than twice. Now, one would think that would be enough to put the argument to bed, but it probably won't, and here's why. This is a classic example of lawyer brain. Now, normally I would mean that as a compliment, but not here. Lawyers are trained to examine every angle of a scenario, and we're taught to analyze the text for evidence to support our arguments. And if the text is not on our side, we look at the legislative history, and if history is not on our side, then we emphasize the facts, because lawyers don't like to give up easily. However, lawyer brain also has a dark side. Just because we can make a convoluted argument doesn't mean that we should make that argument, especially in a situation like this, where we know that the 22nd Amendment was meant to limit a president to 2 terms. So the drafters of the 22nd Amendment did not
Interesting. I wonder if this gets into letter versus spirit of the law.
use the word eligible, but did they really intend to create a loophole that would allow someone to serve a 3rd term despite not being democratically elected? Absolutely not. The people who drafted the amendment were Republicans and conservative Democrats who were outraged that President Roosevelt was elected to a 3rd term in 1940. In 1940, the GOP nominee, Wendell Willkie, ran on the idea that FDR was trying to make himself a king.
And I would also like to debate the question of the assumption by this president in seeking a 3rd term of a greater public confidence than was accorded to our presidential giants, Washington, Jefferson, Jackson, Lincoln, Theodore Roosevelt, and Woodrow Wilson.
And if we could
And make the first galactic empire. I don't know why Revenge of the Sith, Palpatine's acceptance speech came to mind on that one. Oh, the brain rot.
summon the ghost of Willkie right now, I promise you he would not say, yeah, we wanted to prevent the president from being elected to a 3rd term, but we were totally cool with this one weird trick ability to serve a 3rd term by other means. He absolutely would not say that. And Peabody and Grant say they understand that distinguishing between election and service may seem a matter of semantic parsing. It's creative semantic parsing that is contrary to the text and history of the 22nd Amendment. And as much as we would like to believe that the Constitution was written with a kind of biblical inerrancy, it wasn't. And constitutional amendments are incredibly important, but that doesn't mean that the people who drafted them were perfectly precise. The legislators who marked up the draft of the 22nd Amendment probably should have used the word eligible, but they certainly didn't intend to create an anti-democratic loophole. But the Constitution can be amended, and those people who think that President Trump should serve a 3rd term should advocate for the repeal of the 22nd Amendment.
I can already see the counter argument of amendments are unconstitutional. To which then, okay, cool. What about if you don't get the ability to plead the 5th anymore, right? Well, clearly, I mean, 2A, Second Amendment. Oh, but I don't mean those ones. See, once again, we come back to the fucking double talk, and I'm using expletives at this point because it's dumb. It's brain numbing. Pick a lane, my guy. Pick a struggle. You can't say all of them are bad and then be like, oh, but actually, like, these pick and choosy are good. Bro, you literally undermined your own argument. You look like you haven't passed high school, my guy. I question you if you can read the back of a milk carton. Realistically, like, once again, have an opinion. Be able to be educated and come to that opinion. And understand when people like me are like, bro, I don't care what you own. I don't care. Just don't be a dumbass with firearms. That's literally all I ask. And that's still too hard for people to grasp.
And even in the 1940s, there were people who didn't think that the amendment was necessary. They argued that the 22nd Amendment restricts the democratic choices of the electorate, and they said that if a president is popular and doing a great job, then voters should have the right to choose that person's leadership for as long as possible. But honestly, I don't know that any of this matters. These scenarios where multiple
So in a vacuum, if we're arguing strict information in a vacuum, but then we start getting into the decline of education standards, we start getting into, bipartisan, what happens if a 3rd, 4th party emerges, what happens if we have a party that is seen as a foreign threat, such as, I don't know, if we had a Communist Party of America, let's say, right? some people would not take kindly to that for all intents and purposes, right? So we had a North Korean people Republic of North America or something like that, right? If it was a party that rose up and was like, yeah, no, this Kimmy guy here, he's pretty cool, right? So when we we can look at things in a vacuum in regards to the text that was done here, but then you start throwing other things more logs onto the fire, or even gasoline on that fire, and does the core philosophy make sense? Hence why he literally brings up the discussion of, was this necessarily what the individual meant? What was the intention of this, right? Like, there's so much that goes into this, like, that just people, and reasonably a lot of them don't, because of the fast age of the internet which we live in. I get it. Like, videos like this stress me out, okay? They definitely stress me out, because I have to get up and I gotta get rah upsetty spaghetti, and it's just like I guess this is also just the reaction meta. And I really only like covering things like this when I'm at a point where I'm just kind of at a loss for words, and the double talk just becomes too much, and I'm like, look, this needs to get discussed. People need to stop skirting around the subject, and people need to just talk to each other.
People resign so that Trump can take the presidency again seem incredibly far-fetched. That doesn't tend to happen. The people are elected to, the highest office in the land, only to turn around and give it away to somebody else. Depending on what the Supreme Court does with all of Elon Musk's actions, maybe in 2029, Trump would be happy serving as shadow president and avoiding all of the 22nd Amendment rigmarole entirely. But fear not, apparently Donald Trump was distracted enough by the thought of becoming Pope that he said he was not interested in serving a third term. Though who knows what the troll-in-chief is going to say next week. But it's particularly interesting to see how the media has covered this. When Trump originally clarified that he wasn't joking about serving a third term, over 560 sources covered it, with about 20% coming from the right, 60% from the center, and 20% from the left.
I like seeing that the 2/3 of this was from the center. This is actually interesting to me.
And when you examine the headlines, you start to see some very different frames emerge that shape how readers interpret and understand the events that are unfolding. From the right, the most common themes are to emphasize the existence of a so-called loophole, or that Trump believes he can do it. Then from the center, headlines typically lead with Trump's statement that he's not joking, while describing the Constitution as a barrier. And from the left, headlines also tend to lead with Trump's "I'm not joking" statement, but also characterize his ambitions as breaching the constitutional barrier, suggesting a warlike ethos. Now, the headlines that you read first have immense power to shape how you understand the news. And that's why I like to see the news from as many angles as I can, which I can with the help of today's sponsor, Ground News. Ground News is a website and app developed by a former NASA engineer on a mission to give readers an easy, data-driven, objective way to read the news. And right now they're offering Legal Eaglets 40% off their unlimited access Vantage subscription. You can scan the QR code or use the link in the description to get the discount for a limited time. Because Ground News gathers related articles from around the world and across the political spectrum, so you can see the bias and compare coverage. Every story comes with a quick visual breakdown of the political bias, factuality, and ownership of the source's reporting, all backed by ratings from 3 independent news monitoring organizations. One of my favorite parts is their bias comparison feature, which highlights specific differences in reporting across the political spectrum. This can be especially helpful when reading stories from sources you've never heard of, where there's no telling who owns it or what agenda they might have. I also love their blind spot feature, which shows you stories that are underreported by either side of the political spectrum. Like this recent story of the former Wisconsin Supreme Court judge who abused his office to perpetuate the lie that Trump won the 2020 election and must now surrender his license to practice law. This story was virtually ignored by the right, with about a 50-50 distribution between the center and left sources.
I actually think the distribution is very fascinating as somebody who likes numbers and metrics.
Now, this type of analysis helps explain why we often talk past each other and why some people seem hyper-focused on what seems like nonsense or fake news to other people. But this is all why Ground News is my favorite way to get the news. And as a Legal Eaglet, you can save 40% off their Ground News Vantage subscription by scanning the code on screen or clicking on the link down below. This subscription gives you unlimited access to every feature, including the Bias Insight tool and Blind Spot feed. By subscribing, you'll support an independent news platform working to make the media landscape more transparent. So click on the link below or scan the code today. And after that, click on this link over here for more Legal Eagle, or I'll see you in court.
I give it a 9 out of 10. I think it was a good outro ad read. A little long, I think, but ultimately I think it was good. Now, I want to take a minute to clarify. I'm not going to try to make this an overly long outro because I know I have issues with that. I apologize about that. So, at the end of the day, have your own opinion. I will come on here, even, if you will, screech, whatever, right? I'll come on here, I'll talk about things. At the end of the day, you, as a viewer, not really expecting anything. I'm not trying to sway your opinion. I'm not trying to indoctrinate you into some cult. I'm not trying to push some weird agenda on you. I want to be left alone for all intents and purposes. When I have to do things like this, it's because people refuse to leave me alone. Once again, Representative Russ Fulcher of Idaho, remove my email. I don't know how you got my email. I don't know how I got on your mailing list. Remove it. Okay? First off. Second, and this is the question I have to Idaho and people who I've known in the comment section have had the discussion. Okay, Idaho, when are we making, when is the vote for the kingship, for the monarchy happening? It's going to be Idaho or it's going to be Texas. But Texas is currently dealing with the whole retirement home situation, which never seems to get resolved, right? Like, I just need to know the timeline when this is happening at this point, because I still have Warhammer that I still need to build. I still have like Pokemon and stuff that I'm still trying to do. I got a bunch of stuff in my daily life. But as it turns out, people like to talk past each other. People like to dig their heels in and entrench themselves in whatever rhetoric without actually being able to understand what they're vouching for, as well as just hi, my name is John Talking Point, rather than hi, John Doe, how are you doing? Oh, thank you, Kip. Thank you for asking. How are you doing today? I've seen your reactions recently. And being an individual, right? Not, well, you look like the kindly sort, Kip. How you feel about that 2A? Sir, we are not having this conversation. What's the funny? You can't handle the truth? You cannot handle this discussion. Because even though, once again, I'm fairly transparent, own whatever, I don't care. The moment you fuck up, that's when I have an issue with you. Like, ugh. But yeah, thank you everyone for watching. I would very much like to not make this a usual thing. I will speak on things when I feel it is necessary to. I feel less critical about myself because there are individuals out there, a lot of reactors, who do engage in discussions and topics like this. So I do my best to have fun. I do my best to try and make sure we're all having a good time. But sometimes enough is enough, and there needs to be a conversation. This is not a call to action. This is not, calling for the incitement or anything in regards to acts, protests, etc. This is not meant to sway you one way or the other. This is not meant to alienate you in any way, shape, or form in regards to, oh, well, I am insert political party here, and Kip is insert political party here. Bro, I don't care. You're an individual. Do whatever you want, as long as you have an educated conclusion. That's all I care about. Cool. Good for you. Thank you everyone for watching. Thank you, LegalEagle, for making video. I guess, unfortunately, making a video like this because we have to delve into law and apparently spell things out, and because people don't want to answer direct questions. So, yeah, cool. See you whenever this monarchy vote thing is, I guess.